Oh, I only have one copy. Oh, all right, then.
We have schedules right here.
Oh, wait, here. Here's schedules.
Title 21 committee doesn't have a schedule.
All right, I did frankly give some feedback about my concern with skipping those two meetings because I know we're under time pressure, but staff schedules are such that it's really difficult for them to meet continuously. So we're going to skip the 16th and the 23rd. I think personally this is a little bit ambitious, but hopefully we can hold to it and do it. The other part that I want to emphasize is my understanding is we will see some sort of a written format that summarizes what decisions we'd made the previous week, which we haven't gotten yet, but I think we will in the future. Correct, Jerry?
Shortly, we should have had something this morning, but
Well, we just walked in, and I don't know what Tom's got for us, but so far all I've got is little written notes on my documents to summarize our understanding.
Carol's passing out
Oh, thank you, Carol.
an example draft.
All right.
This is an example.
These are working. Thank you, ma'am.
It covers last week's meeting. And
Very good.
What we'd like to do is just, you all take a look at it, see if it's what you were expecting and what you like. We'll fix it and then use a revised version from this point forward. So
Okay.
it's kind of a test, but it is covering
All right.
all of last week's.
Very
So we
good.
can mark it up.
You can, yes, please.
All right, let's, for right now though, since municipal attorney's with us and his time is limited, let's put that aside and go right to our agenda for today. And as you recall, we had some leftover items from Chapter 1, and then we kind of hit them again at the beginning of Chapter 8, which was the issue of how the comp plan interacted with Title 21. And so, Jim or Sally, could I put one of you on the spot to kind of articulate what P&Z's concern was? I'm sorry, no warning, I just plop it at you.
Do you want it?
You go.
Well, you can chime in since you're busy. I think the main concern was that parts of the comprehensive plan are general and get overly emphasized in the review process. And they were trying to, for instance, some of the amendments relate to specific design standards should have priority over the general language in the comp plan in reference to just overall policies, because there were statements, the one that comes to mind is, we want to encourage the retention of natural vegetation. I mean, taken to the extreme, it could mean you can never clear a property to build. And it seemed like there were a number of instances where those type of things were being referred to by the applicant or by somebody as a reason to deny a request or grant a request. And they wanted more specificity as to specifics in Title 21 governing over the generalities in the comp plan. Jim?
Basically, we looked at the comp plan as a strategic plan, Title 21 as a tactical plan. Just trying to follow the guidelines of Title 2020 or Anchorage 2020, but get down to the specifics that we need to interpret it. And I think that's what we were trying to do. There are also conflicts within Anchorage 2020. Just sort of kind of we were trying to sort out and said this is the direction we were trying to take.
Okay. All right, and the concern, on the other hand, from planning staff was that by law, the comp plan governs. And so we were trying to work through that to see why this language was problematic. So, Dennis, can you chime in and help us?
I'll do my best. I think you may have been sent by email, Tom, you can chime in on this. Some previous opinions that we had done, one from 2000 and one from 2010. In addition to a short document, 2-3 pages that had some charter references and some quotes out of some case law.
Dennis, I don't think that it was a concern. We didn't ever argue the comp plan wasn't law. It was just, why is this language problematic?
Right, right. So the basics, the point of all of this material is to point out that the basic structure is you have a comp plan, that's your guiding document, and underneath that you're going to have your implementing provisions. As he mentioned, you have your strategy and your tactical plan. That said, there shouldn't, if there's going to be conflicts between the plan and the implementing language, what it says is that your implementing language is out of adjustment, if you will, with your plan. So this is all in the drafting. It's all the devil's in the details. If you have code that predates your plan, in theory, that code needs to be updated. So are you going to, in this language here, say that the code, whether it's, for example, in this last sentence, if the code is either more restrictive or less restrictive, it's still going to govern? That would seem to fly against the notion that your comp plan is your guiding document. And if your code is out of step with that, it doesn't matter whether it's more or less restrictive, you're going to go with the code. Well, that seems to disregard the planning process and the guidelines that you put in place. So the issue is, how do you want to handle both old code and new code that comes forward, and plan elements that you amend over time? So you want to start with this notion that you have a top-down structure, the comp plan first, and then your code second.
I'm trying to think of specific situations that you brought up that was problematic. And the only thing I can remember is the no net reduction in housing. Is that was one of the concerns that came up? I wish that one of the advocates for this were here. I think that was one.
And I gave a very simplified example, and that is stream setbacks. Let's say your comp plan says you want to preserve stream setbacks, and you have this target in mind, so that where possible you want stream setbacks to be 50 feet, let's say. So your comp plan would say stream setbacks should be 50 feet. Well, in many, many cases, that's not practical. It's not going to advance the goals over time. You may have code that says 25 feet. So the language in the plan that says should be 50 feet is okay with code that says it's 25, where possible, say through a conditional use process or other requirements, you might up that to 50 where appropriate. You may have chances for variances, you may have chances for non-conforming uses. So again, your comp plan controls, you're shooting for 50, but it's not so black and white in the comp plan that you have to do 25 in every instance. So that's where the drafting in the comp plan and the code is very important.
And then the inverse in the plan and in the comp plan, where it talks about no net loss of residential conversion, it says shall. So there's stronger language in the comp plan for that. So then it becomes more challenging to not adhere to that language.
Well, my understanding of the concern was that if you have a zoning district that allows a specific density, but yet when there's a hearing before P&Z and the parameters for the decision are general statements in the comp plan, is it fair or realistic to use that rather than what's in Title 21 as the stricture? Maybe I'm not understanding correctly.
Those are general statements. Those are general guidelines to be used in the review of the application. They're not the law. They're not the code that actually effectuates the development, but they are still guiding principles, general guiding principles out of the comprehensive plan. It depends on the language and the kinds of accomplishments that were desired at the time that language was put into the comp plan.
And of course, in our situation, our comp plan is way, way old, and Title 21 is going to be brand new, and so how do you deal with general statements that are way outdated and,
The comp plan is passed through for an update.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, it's compared to, say, the state level, for example, it is so easy if you will, for the assembly to make changes, because you can get something through the Planning and Zoning Commission or go around the Planning and Zoning Commission through code to make changes both to the code and to the plan, that it would be difficult to convince a court that you couldn't have fixed this problem if it was brought to your attention in a timely way. So, for example, if you decide that the plan is outdated on a particular topic and you want code in place, you can say, oh, by the way, here's our new code and we're amending the plan consistent with this code objective.
Okay. Well, I think the committee was trying to recognize both the concerns from P&Z and to legitimize the comp plan. And so personally, at least, I wanted some middle ground between the two, and I was struggling to find it. Do you think, Jerry, that this can be reworked, so that there is recognition that the more immediate language, the more specific language governed?
I believe we had language that clarified the hierarchy and the relationship between the two, the applicability on the.
Well, I was rereading it again last night, and
Because there's no question that the code is the effectuating tool for development. There's no question about that at all. The staff does take the comprehensive plan and all of its elements into consideration in reviewing applications. Those are the guiding principles that have been adopted by the various commissions and the legislative body that give it substance in the review process. So that's why they're the base tool to evaluate those development applications.
Sally?
I still think there needs to be something that addresses the conflicts, because it seems like the language that you keep putting back in that is offensive to the commission or disagreement is more of the generalities of just follow the comp plan. And that, there's nothing wrong with that concept, but it doesn't get at what their concern is. Their concern is really talk about conflicts. You know, could we have some kind of provision that addresses when there are conflicts? Then, I mean, the one little sentence in the start of Chapter 8 is, you know, the standards and requirements of this chapter shall govern in the event of a conflict between the comp plan and this title. If that's too strong, then maybe we can work that language, but I think there needs to be something that hits the nail on the head instead of talking about, yes, we're going to comply with the comp plan. Is fine, but it isn't addressing the issue really.
I think it's a doable thing. You know, the language is. I think it's a doable thing to put a provision in there that talks about those kinds of conflicts. But we need to come up with some wording.
Harriet?
I plugged in the CD that was part of our notebook last night and took a look at quite a few of the documents. Dennis, I'm really glad you're here, because in October of 2000, you had the same opinion, that the comprehensive plan governs. The Assembly in October 2000 posed the question, is it mandatory for land use decisions to follow the comprehensive plan? Brief answer subject to the background and discussion below. The answer is yes. I'm glad your opinion is still consistent. Unfortunately, it's 12 years later. We are now 8 years away from 2020, which is what this comprehensive plan was written for. There are other communities in this nation that are working on their 2040 plans. I think we need to stop creating conflicts through the Planning and Zoning Commission process and move forward and adopt this thing. That's all I have to say.
Go ahead, Mr.
It
Manson.
seems like the comp plan you can think of as a statute, and Title 21 is the regulations implementing the statute.
Right.
So
Well,
the-
maybe not quite.
if the regulations are inconsistent with the comp plan, then the regulations should be invalidated. But in terms of administering the law, it seems to me that in terms of permitting process, Title 21 should be followed unless the Title 21 provisions are deemed to be unlawful because they're inconsistent with the comp plan.
Okay. Well, I don't think there's disagreement with that, but there was concern, at least from several people that I talked to, that what you proposed as a response didn't adequately address the concern on conflicts. So, I don't know, Dick or Ernie, you want to chime in? My personal request would be to go back and rewrite this a little bit to try to address some of the concerns better.
Yeah. And that's what I'm under the impression we're talking about doing is.
060B complex,
Yeah,
something there.
Mhm.
yeah.
If we had some concrete examples, it would be helpful, because in my past experience, sometimes what is perceived as a conflict isn't actually a conflict.
Okay.
Or if a staff person who's less familiar with the whole structure has an incorrect interpretation and they ask us, we say, well, no, actually, here's how it should apply.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's always a situation where there's human error involved, but again, in the absence of examples, it's hard to say that there is this
We have
true
been,
conflict, because that framework plan is pretty light compared to a lot of other plans that, I mean, it really was not meant to be black and white.
Tom?
Because I'm
and
sorry,
we've, staff in the planning division, we've been looking for examples from other communities. Like, for example, of course, they have the same kinds of fundamental issues. We did not find an example where a zoning ordinance had a general conflicts provision. We looked at a guidelines book for legislation at the state level. The only example that I read about dealing with conflicts basically was where the community basically stated, in the event of a conflict, one or the other, the code or the plan must be updated within 6 months, or the code shall be found invalid. So we really don't have, we can continue to look. I'm sure there must be some examples, but that's basically have come up with no examples of a zoning ordinance with this kind of conflicts provision.
Okay.
But we can continue to look. And
Dennis, the only one I know, and this isn't my issue, I just came from it, so I may not have it right on track, but rezones on density is the only thing that I remember, that where if there's a rezone and it maybe is in a transit corridor or as identified by the comp plan, or town center area as identified by the comp plan, even if those are not, even if potentially we know that that isn't really going to happen now, then that would have been given as advice to the commission because of the comp plan. I hope I'm getting this right. I think I am. And so, should that be guidance when you don't find anything in here that would, that's the only example. But maybe if, Jim or Sally, if you could pass back to somebody on the commission who actually has a more concrete example, if you email to me, I can zip it to Jerry, Tom, and Dennis. Okay? Or you can go directly to them too, certainly. All right? I realize we're giving you another one of those complex problems with no clear solutions, Tom. But at this point, all I can ask you is put a little more time in it, unless you've got some better advice, Dennis.
We'll take a look and see what we come up with.
Okay.
And that's on those three sections, right? Those 60 and...
Yeah, I got it for 01, 060, 01, 080, and then at the very beginning of 8, we hit it again, the 8010.
then there's another one.
Oh, is there another one?
Latter part of 8.
Oh, 050, 8050.
I'll work with Tom and see what we come up with.
Jim?
Debbie, one other player in this thing are the citizens trying to interpret this code.
Right.
That is, I mean, I taught Anchorage 2020.
Right.
And you read through this thing, and it doesn't provide the clarity that Title 21 does. I'm not saying Title 21 is clear, but it gives somebody the direction, this is how it's to be interpreted. And certainty is good. And that we're trying to make sure that there is
Certainty.
direction here, as opposed to somebody reading this, then somebody else reading Title 21 and not knowing who's on first base.
Yeah.
It's like you can have two recipes to make spaghetti. And they both are good spaghetti, but you gotta have one or the
So you
other.
like the teaspoon over the pinch, do you?
Yes.
Cheryl?
I think the issue is that it's been very clear for many months that some people, years, disagree with the comprehensive plan. And this is the first, most bold strategy we've had to wipe out huge goals for pedestrian safety, neighborhood protection, increased landscaping. It's been very bold. And so
Okay.
I think that's really what's on the table today.
Well, I think the direction from us is not to delegitimize the comp plan, but to clarify how we deal with conflicts. But we'll see what we can come up with.
We can do that, and
All
you'd be right. I mean, the code, there's no question, the code, when said, those by right applications that come in every day,
Uh-huh.
they use Title 21. It's those discretionary decisions, it's those conditional uses, those rezonings,
Yeah.
the discretionary decisions that the staff uses to go back in the comp plan. So it's not everything. It's not everything across the board that gets evaluated to plan. It's the discretionary items.
Right. Exactly. Okay, let's go back to Chapter 8. Thank you, Dennis. We appreciated you being here, even if you feel like...
No, it's fine.
And you're certainly free to stay, you know. Right?
You dismissed.
Thank you, Dan.
I've been seeing way too much of Bernie lately.
Yeah, right, I bet.
You get billable hours later.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if you remember, we started 8. Excuse me. I also noted that I've got a few of my own on 8, so maybe you and I should talk again so I can get them to you in advance, because you got my first few, but not the latter chapters.
We switched around the chapters.
Okay, because I've got 2 more besides what you articulated in terms of concerns. Okay, if you've got the subdivision, Chapter 8, and Dan, there's an 8 over here if you want. I think there's 8s. Are there extra 8s?
Yeah, lots of 8s.
Lots of 8s. Mr. Kendall. Okay,
So you
well,
really-
we just talked about number 1. I'm sorry, Tom.
Sorry, if you're looking, you really need the 2 documents. You also need the track change version provided by the commission.
Yeah, thank you. 2 documents. Okay, are we ready? We're ready. All right, we dealt with the first one just now, I hope. And the multi-phase one, the second one, you said you were going to look for that, I just have a blank. Who is the municipal attorney back under Begich?
I found the
You
document.
found it? Oh, way cool.
I believe you already have it, but let's make sure it's the one you're looking for. Because in the very end of the opinion,
Yeah, Vanessa.
Vanessa talks about the relationship for exactions.
All right. If nobody objects, I'd like to, again, hold this one so I have a chance to read this. Is that all right? If we skip 2? So we have a chance to read this?
So are we going to be quiet and read this, or are we going to wait till next time?
I'd like to wait till next time.
Okay.
So what I'm doing, Harriet, is just going through the amendments that P&Z made, which we did most of them, half of them at least,
Last time.
last time. And we got stuck then. Okay, I thought you agreed with 3 on the private streets. You were fine with that, right? Because you didn't say anything.
We recommend that on page
Oh,
11, pages 10 and 11 of the reviewed document that,
of the blue line,
of the blue line,
Uh-huh.
excuse me, of the,
of your document. Okay.
that,
Oh, I'm sorry, you did have something there.
Presently, private streets are an exception to the code. The conventional requirement is that they be publicly dedicated and improved.
Okay.
Private streets are sometimes used in condominium projects and certainly appropriate, but we don't believe that they should be a by right, that they still should continue to be an exception to the code and that a variance be applied for. That way they can demonstrate that their project is sufficiently large enough to for a homeowners association to take responsibility for the streets and the maintenance of them, because in the past decades, people with private streets would come back in and ask that they be maintained publicly because they're mostly in ARTSA, sometimes in ARTSA, that they're paying condo dues and ARTSA, that they say, well, why should we pay twice? So we want to make sure that when it goes through the variance process, that it's sufficiently reviewed to make sure that it will probably not come back for municipal responsibility in maintaining the streets.
Are there significant hurdles for the variance process to get private streets?
We have many properties out there with private streets.
Well, I just know they've worked very successfully in parts of my district. Eaglewood, I'm thinking of in particular. And so,
Eaglewood was one of the first.
We're still on some of our site condo units, so.
well,
Remember, couldn't give a fire truck down some of them.
And see, Eaglewood was constructed with variance, but they were constructed in municipal standards too. It's not like just because you give them a variance to private streets instead of public streets, where they're still required to build them to good standards.
Yeah, the idea is to
Because
get
that was a problem
narrower.
in the past too, and if they want them narrow and it fits in with the development plan, that's fine as long as it doesn't create inconsistencies from public streets, from one public street to another public street, that they create circulation problems, that they certainly are appropriate in certain locations.
do you, oh, Harriet, and then I'm going to ask P&Z.
Or that you have a winter like last winter, where there was so much snow, it was almost impossible to clear streets, and streets that are too narrow are going to be very difficult to clear, especially if there isn't enough private open space to store snow in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One domino to the next.
Jim or Sally, do you remember, is it the variance process is too tough, or what's the deal?
I have no knowledge on this one.
Sally?
I think the thought is, if you have a homeowners association that is maintaining the streets and you're going to develop a property, why do you have to come apply for a variance? You're developing a property, the city is not going to have to do snow removal, it's not going to have to do maintenance on the streets, it's going to be the homeowner's responsibility. And if it's the homeowner's responsibility and there's a note recorded on the plat so that there's plenty of notice, why do we have to involve the municipal process? Why isn't it just allowed?
So,
Okay. Why does the city have a concern? They're not going to have to maintain the streets, they're not going to have to snowplow the streets.
So your concern is that you have experienced subdivisions that have asked for maintenance?
one of the reasons why public streets are standard is that it's a standard way of building a street network to make sure that there's no obstruction or inconsistency in the street network. And in a lot of cases where it's been allowed by exception, it's found to work with the development.
Wait a minute, the outline of where the streets are located has been problematic? Is that what you just said?
No, it's the way they're constructed and the design. So public streets there's basically a standard for, the width and the design. And so you have a consistent design from one development to another, between developments or part of town. So this exceptions process just makes sure that private street's going to work in that case, rather than just allowing it by
In the
right.
past, I would answer your question directly. There have been many properties, either mobile home parks or condominium projects, that come back and say, we'd like public maintenance on our streets. We're in ARTSA, we're paying ARTSA fees for that. but we don't really have an identified list of all those, because basically the line is that until your streets are constructed to municipal standards, we will not take them back. So
Yeah.
there have been lots of people that have come forward to ask that, so.
And we just say no.
We just say no, so we don't have a whole list of where they are, but those are kind of the examples of marginal projects that are just not able to sustain the maintenance, either the snow removal or the maintenance of their streets, that they kind of just get in a box where they come back and they want the public to maintain it. So what we're saying through the variance process is they have to demonstrate that the homeowners association is sufficiently created to maintain that. So like a 5-unit project might not.
One more
work.
question. Is there any way short of going through a whole variance where you could determine if the homeowners association is sufficient? I mean, that's apparently how you do it
Well,
now.
you can do that right now on a track under the provisions to develop a private street on a track for a large association, that they need to come through, they need to construct it to municipal standards. So I think there's a little mixing and matching going, because they can already do that on a large multifamily tract if they so desire. It still has to come under municipal review to build it to standards
That's what I thought.
on, through Don's area.
I thought private streets you had to, oh, Don, you're here. You're the perfect person for this question. Don't private streets have to meet certain municipal standards?
Yes, they do. They have to match public standards, in fact, where they're in a public right of way.
Okay, so is maintenance the only problem? Just to put you
Maintenance
on.
isn't the only problem. As soon as a lot of these homeowner associations get into a position to where the streets have deteriorated, to where they need extensive repair or even replacement, that's when we start getting the calls. What would it take for the city to take it over? Because they don't want the expense of replacing the street.
Debbie, can I just say that this is in the subdivision portion,
Yeah.
and it's always, for decades, been an exception to the code. It doesn't say you can't do it in multifamily districts. You're allowed to do it under the current code. We're not changing that either. So what we're saying is, in the subdivision regulations, it should be an exception not to dedicate to public streets.
Dick,
I agree with Jerry, because over the years, I've seen a lot of people come in. Would you please take over maintenance of roads, because we don't have the ability to maintain them, and they're not to city standards. Remember one time we had a neighborhood came in, they were upset because they couldn't get fire trucks down their streets. The streets were constructed so narrow. When somebody was parked there, you just couldn't get a fire truck down there. The developer said, just run over the streets, run over the sidewalks. You can't do that if there's a fire going on.
okay, Jim, and then Harriet.
Jerry, if I came in with a variance request today, how long would it take me to get that variance request?
45 days from the time you submit it.
That,
45.
that is probably a major impediment. If there's some process that could be granted easier than 45 days, some of the objection would go away. But I mean, that hurts our season. And second of all, I think any of our streets have to be approved by the fire department, irrespective of whether they're private or public, if they're going to serve anything. They've got to be approved by the fire department. There may have been a period in the past where that wasn't done. But today's street, the fire department has the first and last words, I think, and Don has his hand up too.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, go ahead, Ben, and then Harriet.
For a lot of these subdivisions, we offer the pre-application meeting to where they come in and they pitch their idea.
Okay.
If in fact they're promoting a private street in a subdivision,
Uh-huh.
at the time they submit their application for the subdivision, we tell them to submit concurrently the request for a variance for no access to a public street from these individual lots. So the clock can actually run concurrently for the variance and the evaluation of the plat.
Would you mind coming up here since you're the subdivision guy? Harriet, did you have something?
Garbage trucks appear to becoming an issue as they all move to automated service and much larger and heavier vehicles. They're real concerned about the construction of streets being able to handle these much larger vehicles, not to mention the width. There are parts of this town that have had alley service forever, but the alleys are not paved or nor constructed to standards, and there are a lot of people that are having to change the way they deal with their trash on a weekly basis.
You wanna ask him about
Never
garbage
mind
trucks?
an occasional, emergency access. A weekly basis, very large vehicles have to make it through our streets, and they have to be constructed right.
Have the garbage trucks been a problem? I mean, have you heard complaints about lack of access on
Just last
for
winter, we
garbage trucks?
started getting calls because of the snow wasn't removed. They couldn't get down these alleyways where that's a pickup point.
Okay. All right, Carol, and then we need to decide here.
I just want you to know, I mean, we have an issue in South Addition, same thing. People don't want to bring it out front. That's what the alleys are for. And just in the last 10 days, I saw an undersized garbage collection truck. So I was very excited. This is the way most cities deal with it. They bring in equipment to fit those older streets.
Okay,
Good,
all
glad
right.
to hear that.
Well, my approach to this is that private roads work pretty well in my district, and I'm used to having people complain about maintenance, and I just always say, well, you gotta be up to standard if you want maintenance, and it's been kind of accepted. So I don't know, I mean, for me, it's not been a deal, but,
I agree.
okay. So it appears we've got 2-2. 2 people who agree with Jerry and 2 people who agree with P&Z. So at this point, maybe let's leave it the way it is, and then we'll do amendments to deal with it. I don't know how else. If Jennifer's not here and we have an even number of folks. Okay, moving on. The next one. Oh, the multi-phase projects is the one that you had given us the sheet on, so we were going to hold on that one. Right, okay, I'm sorry. And the cul-de-sacs, we were going to defer to Chapter 7, the cul-de-sac sidewalks. Okay, I had a question on the next one. You don't mention it, but they made an amendment that said driveways on lot frontage where there are alleys are prohibited. Why would we do that?
We've addressed that on page 13 of our issue response, 8.5.
I'm sorry, I didn't. This must be different. Is this different from what you gave us last time?
We
The draft
This is what we
version?
gave you on Tuesday.
Okay, that's why I'm confused. I was going with the draft one that we worked off last meeting. Yeah, I got that too. I didn't know this was different, so I didn't read this, Tom. I
Well, this-
just took your old one.
This one someone actually discovered after that draft.
Okay, so
and,
I made assumptions that were incorrect.
We basically had the same question. We do have the alley access standards established in Chapter 7. They were worked out carefully with the assistance of the traffic engineer through the public process, and they're actually more flexible than what's proposed here. What's proposed here is really in the wrong section.
Okay,
It
could-
doesn't make sense to provide that here.
Just a second. Why did P&Z want to say this? Do you remember? Do you under?
Why don't you keep talking, I'll try to look and see.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't understand what the purpose was. What's the problem you're trying to fix? Okay.
Well, the problem is, in South Addition, you can see it right in new construction, and all of a sudden you've got most of the front side of the street paved, when you've got perfectly good alley access for the vehicles.
Okay, so you like this?
Yeah, it damages the character of the old neighborhoods.
Okay.
Well, again, this issue is addressed in Chapter 7 in the access standards, and that is in Section 2107-110H4. And it gets to that issue. And
Okay.
it gets to it in a flexible way we worked out
Okay.
with the traffic engineer based
Can
on
we
research.
leave this for 7 then, since we're going to talk about it in 7?
I think that would be most
Okay.
appropriate.
Since we are doing the sidewalk cul-de-sac deal then too, let's just put this one in 7. Okay, the geotech. Well, I reread this and I thought about it. You want to say anything? Or
I
should
need to see what you thought.
Oh, man, cool. I think that you should continue to be able to require the geotech from staff. And the only change here in current process I'd recommend is there should be some recognition for that lady who had the lot, the small narrow lot last time, who said that,
Studies on both sides,
Yeah.
versus the middle, yeah.
yeah. So can we write an additional sentence somehow that said if there is geotech information available from adjacent lots, it can be used? We had a lady here who told us she had a very narrow lot. I forget how.
75 feet width, I think.
Yeah, and she said she was prohibited from using the geotech research material that was available from adjacent lots.
On both sides
This
are.
is in Bootlegger's Cove, keep in mind, right
Okay.
on the edge of the
So
water.
it was consistent reports from adjacent properties.
Well, I don't know that. She just said she was prohibited and had to do new borings even though borings were available. Is that's practice, do you know?
She will, in that situation, for a building permit, have to do soil exploring on her property.
So is it unreasonable to say that she could use data from a neighbor
I
that's
don't think it's
10 feet
unreasonable.
away?
I think she would use that in conjunction with her analysis of it.
Okay, our understanding was that she was being prohibited from using that.
I'll use a very recent example from a new subdivision going in right now as we speak. They did a geotechnical investigation along the entire alignment of the new road. When the contractor got out there, I don't know about how they chose the two locations to do the geotech, but the entire project was something different than what the geotech report said. They just happened to find two places where they found clean gravel. The rest was 5 to 6 feet of peat.
Well, we don't want that.
No, we don't want that. So you could run into the same situation on the hillside, some of the new subdivisions going in. They don't drill test borings as often as they possibly would like to just because of the expense. But the bedrock they run into in some situations, it's now big change orders to projects. And you could
Okay.
have that variance between lot to lot to lot.
Well, what if it's like 10 feet away or something like that?
I believe we could come up with some language that's used as a common practice, that they use that information
I think
adjacent to
that's the
properties.
only lingering concern we
The
had.
local-
Is there a distance standard between borings that could apply to in narrow lot situations? I mean, I don't know what a narrow lot is as far, but I think this was a multiple family dwelling that she was trying to.
Was it?
It
to put
is
in
it's
application.
Grace Pleasance, and it's a multifamily project of 25 or more.
Okay, that's, I think, the only concern the committee has right now,
We-
is
we-
to somehow address that. Because
can
she
s-
she gave a fairly compelling testimony to us.
We can come up with some language with, talk to building safety
Okay.
to see what they do in their analysis, and they use the peripheral information as part of the analysis, but they do require soil exploring on the parcel as well.
All right, well, I don't know. Is that okay, guys?
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I was here in 1964, so I got this thing in the back of my mind about this geotech. I see us building where immediately following the earthquake, we were never, ever going to build there again. It just wasn't going to happen.
And
I'm concerned about what the liability to the municipality is going to be one of these days when 1964 occurs again. It's inevitable. So newcomers, you move in and you say, gosh, what's the deal here? But if you rode that one in 1964, you kind of have an understanding of what the big deal is.
yeah, and it is a big deal, so we are not with P&Z on this one. Go ahead, John.
Okay,
Last,
comment.
Oh, yeah.
Geotech is a crapshoot, everybody. I watched it. You can drill it and hit it. Maybe what you want to do is that the borings, treat the borings separate from the report, Jerry. I think that they need a report, but borings on adjacent property could be used because it's different for a 2-story building and a 6-story building area.
Right.
And so separate the borings issue from the report issue.
okay,
And
yeah.
if it's required for a building permit, it has not a whole lot to do with the adjacent properties, right? It's for that building
for
on
that
that property,
property.
under
It's
that
zones
foundation.
4 and 5 they're required for, and that's all downtown.
Okay. All right, what gives us the next one?
I apologize. If Our geotech staff person has offered some amendments, technical primarily, to the section, and it's in our document here. It's on page
What?
20.
Oh,
And
kind of skipping around then, huh?
so
Sorry.
we recommend retaining the provisionally adopted language, but with these amendments, and he had a couple members of the advisory commission, Geotech Commission, look at it. And
Okay.
basically would...
Well, basically, we were going with what you were saying, so I'm assuming this is okay with people. With the only caveat being that particular.
That exception.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. And then you were, I guess, okay with their number 12.
Number 12.
Add the word small subdivision lot after townhouse lot. You don't mention that one.
We do.
Oh, okay. Tom, I did you
Well, you're
wrong
gonna-
by
you're gonna
not
get
reading
one
this
in a minute.
one.
You're
I
gonna
tell
get
you,
one in a minute.
I just did the old one.
So in your, first of all, in this version, it's on page 21. In the blue line version, it's on page 7, line 41. Page 7, line 41.
Okay, this is exactly addressing, I thought, what the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations were for more flexibility for smaller lots. And so it seemed fine to me. And so your big argument is it will disrupt neighborhoods?
We support the small lot housing,
But you want to do it later.
not later, but it is proposed here without the design standards, without the community review. Communities do a small lot housing ordinance. In fact, the recent housing study completed in March recommends looking into a small lot housing ordinance. But that, when lots are reduced in size, there's a need to look at...
How small a lot does
the
this
im-
make?
Sorry?
How small a lot does this make? I'm trying to envision why this is a problem.
Well, we are too.
1/3 of the depth.
Basically, when you develop a provision like this, what a community does is they identify potential effects on neighborhoods of allowing smaller lots, and then they identify the appropriate locations, the appropriate minimum lot size, and potential community expectations with regard to building bulk, driveway width, what have you, because when the lot gets narrower, it does have the potential to disrupt the current feel of the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood. So what the housing study recommended was that get Title 21 done, and then develop the small lot, because what
Not
that...
quite what they recommended. I was in there. There were some specifics that they recommended, including 3,000-foot lots are down there. So
Exactly. But what that recommended was that be done through a public process where the public and the community has the opportunity to look at the potential impacts and then mitigate for them in the ordinance.
Okay, that's not how I interpreted the Affordable Housing Task Force study. But I don't clearly understand what the implications are, frankly, of a 1/3 of the depth of the lot. So they want this the same as a townhouse lot. They want to be able to build a house on the same size as a townhouse lot, right?
A narrower lot.
Comments? Anybody? Harriet?
Well, other than I grew up on a 25-foot by 104-foot lot, and I survived, and so did my family. I'm not sure that I understand the dimensional aspect
That's
of
what I
this
was,
either.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
But I think that in the more, the denser parts of this city, I think we have to come up with some small lot as we redevelop. I think it needs to be understood that it's cheaper for utilities to have smaller lots and less distance between buildings. I don't think there's anything wrong with having smaller lots, but it just has to be done in appropriate parts of town. I think it'd be pretty odd in your neighborhood, for example, to have 25-foot wide lots.
So, then, this basically, I would allow flexibility for lots, weird-shaped lots in certain places that are narrower in the front.
What's weird?
Well, weird meaning not narrower, but longer it could be, instead of just smaller, right? Would this enable you to do smaller or just different shaped?
Probably both.
Why would it enable smaller?
We have star-shaped lots in this town for
That's
different
a weird
reasons.
Star shape.
So why do you think, why does this allow smaller?
Okay, without some guidelines on what small really is, because this right now is, it's a width to depth
Yeah.
ratio issue.
Right.
And if you start without a real definition of what the expectation is, you could have a lot higher density within a full new subdivision.
The expectation, okay,
And it kind of goes hand in hand with the next one on the agenda, 812. It's about smaller frontages on cul-de-sacs.
okay.
After a while, how skinny do you get a lot before you start saying, okay, you're into violation of other regulations, both at the municipality and the state, just because you can't get separation between utilities that you want. You
Okay.
end up with solid pavement of driveway outside of the right-of-way because the lots are too narrow.
Okay,
It's
but-
those types of issues.
So this is currently allowed for townhouse lots, though?
Correct.
It's just the amendment would allow it for small subdivision. Hey, Cheryl, can you help?
Yeah, we had an example in our neighborhood where the only thing that prevented a second house going into a large backyard was the ratio between the width and the depth of the lot. It would have allowed a 35-foot structure on a slope, would have knocked out 60-year-old views and a bunch of sunlight.
So you think this is problematic, huh? Is that what?
Yeah, I think it needs to go through a public process. People need to take a real hard look at this before we go for it as a community. People need to know the ins and the outs of it.
When I was the American Planning Association conference in LA this past spring, they did a day-long mobile tour about their small lot housing ordinance. And it was really cool. It was really exciting, but they really described all the different issues they went through, not only with the public and the neighborhoods, but also to figure out issues that builders could possibly face, work those out in the ordinance. But one of the main things they found was dealing with the utility and the building department, making sure that they are okay and they can help implement the ordinance. So, it's doing it right, and it's doing it right for the community.
Tom, I thoroughly embrace the doing it right, but I also know that I've spent 9 years on Title 21, and it's still not there. And I think that the affordable housing crisis is really, really serious and significant. I was astounded when I got all the data on that. And I think it's imperative that we address some of the concerns for entry-level housing in this community. And I don't know how to do it. Besides, you're just telling me, well, wait, we'll do it in more comprehensive public way later, So I'm trying to nip at it in a way where I can do something now. So I'm sort of...
I guess for my part, I don't mind when it's done, but I think whenever we do, whether we decide in this process or separately during this process, it really...
The logic
really
is that for small lot development, you really need to take a look at the overall project itself. There's nothing wrong with small lot development. We're allowed to do that today. You can create as small a lot as you want through a cluster subdivision application or through a PUD. They're used, the PUD has been used for quite a long time, but cluster development has been used. But what staff's saying is that rather than allow it by right for small lot development, it really needs an ordinance that governs
No, I know what you're saying.
the utility separation, those
Yeah, I heard.
other things.
Sally?
I was just going to reiterate that really what you're saying is what P&Z was saying. They even talked about drafting their own small lot subdivision ordinance to try to get it moving because they read the affordable housing studies and were very concerned. And they talked to me about trying to quickly draft something, an ordinance for it. They're totally in favor of that, but they thought, based on how long things take, how long is that going to take before that's done? And in the meantime, this provides some flexibility.
Okay, I'm gonna need to go down here. Ernie, where are you on it? Or Dick or Harriet?
Yeah,
Go
what was
ahead.
the question?
Tom, that meeting you went to in LA in planning, did they address the issue of playgrounds with small lot subdivisions? Because you cram a lot of kids there, you gotta have to have some place for them to play. They have a lot set apart for playground within the subdivision, you know?
LA's ordinance is very specific to small infill lots, and so it provided minor open space, but I think far less than what I think you're talking about. So I don't think it was that scale. There are other communities have cottage housing ordinances that, yes, cluster the houses around a central open space that they share. It's very tasteful. And
I have Seattle's cottage housing ordinance at home, and I've got it on my pile of to be looked at when I have time to breathe. Go ahead,
And
Harriet.
after you're off the assembly?
Yeah, probably. Harriet or Dick, do you want to weigh in on this?
What is the question?
Do we go with P&Z or do we go with staff? Staff says take it out. And that what P&Z did was add this provision to have this narrower lot for small subdivision housing instead of just townhouse housing.
What I'm hearing is that staff thinks it's appropriate, but not without developing it properly. I think
So
we're
later.
asking them to do too much at the same time.
Okay, so you go with staff?
I think so.
Dick?
With staff.
May I
yeah.
ask where the lot was that you grew up on?
In the Bronx, New York.
Okay. They don't experience anywhere near the snow loads that we do in a small lot where you have a disproportionate width to length, to where you have no snow storage left because it's either driveway or thin strip of.
We had sidewalks, we had
Right.
parking on the street.
Okay.
We had an issue with something called double parking, which I don't think anybody in this room knows what double parking is.
Parking
We had
next to
snow
somebody
removal.
on the street.
We cleared our own sidewalks, even though they were, city property. There's a whole lot of things we do differently here. And yes, snow shut it down regularly, but it got taken care of.
Okay.
We also didn't have one car per person. We had one car for every 4 people in New York, and I think that's still the case.
Okay. Ernie?
Appears to me you may have another 2-2 here. I'm tending to go with P&Z. I understand what we're talking about here. I also understand where you're at. We need to get this document finished. Understanding that we're going to have work that's got to be done and amendments made after we've done it.
It's always challenging when you have even numbers on a committee. Go ahead.
Debbie, everybody here says that this is a good deal. I mean, I haven't heard anybody say against
Right.
it. They just, by leaving it in there, it gives it an impetus to get it done. If we take it out, then it's going to fall by the wayside and it won't happen for 10 years.
Okay, well, at this point, because the committee's split, we're on hold with it, in essence, until we get better direction. So, moving on, the next one. This is the cul-de-sac one.
On this issue, the Planning and Zoning Commission is recommending amendment on Blue Line version, page 8, line 30.
Yeah, we saw it, changing from 30 to 30, 35 to 30.
The
But they said, Tom, that 30 was current. Is that true?
In fact, I think that 35 is current.
All right, that's the critical question for me. Can you help, Mr. Kiefer? Do you know? Their rationale is that this is a change from current, and it's currently 30 feet. Can you find out, please?
I'll look that up. Okay, can move on.
Jim?
This comment on OSHA, the first comment is bogus. We constantly work within a box when we're working on utilities. We don't lay it back. There is no 30-foot workspace requirement in OSHA. We have to provide safe access to the ditch. You go in with these steel boxes you see everybody haul around with. You work in about an 8-foot wide steel box and you get the work done.
Okay. But for me, the critical question is, are we changing current code? So I've got two people looking, huh?
Is 30 feet.
Okay, so it's currently 30. So why are we increasing it? That wasn't you? Okay. Well, I'm just as soon stay with current language myself unless there's a compelling reason to increase it. Does anybody object?
I'm not sure
Harriet?
what the I'm trying to figure out what the problem is here.
Well, the provisionally adopted apparently said 35 feet. P&Z moved it back to 30, saying it's 30 now, why change it? And so the question, do we go with what P&Z is saying or what provisional said?
Well, it's pretty clear to me that if it says, where does it say that it's 30 now?
It's
In Title 21.
Okay.
2183.
Does reducing the minimum frontage allows more, does that allow more lots to be packed into a cul-de-sac?
No, current law says it's 30. We, in provisionally adopted, changed it. They said stick with the current.
I'm not a big fan of cul-de-sacs. You know, the narrower
Okay.
they get, the worse they get.
Okay, so
Harder
you'd prefer to
remove
change, to keep it as a provisionally adopted at
snow.
35?
35.
Okay, I'm with 30.
And in fact, I think if you add sidewalks, then that might make the lots wider.
Okay, we've
Put
got
sidewalks back.
the majority of the committee saying go to 30 on that. We're going to deal with the sidewalks and cul-de-sacs in Chapter 7, so don't lose that thought.
Point of order.
There's not really a point of order, but go ahead, Cheryl.
Did you folks purposely skip over 8.6?
All I'm doing is going through their amendment sheet,
Okay.
so I don't know, what's 8.6?
We'll raise those.
Okay.
See, what happened is this doesn't match the order of the amendments here. So since I'm chair and I went through it this way,
Okay, that's
I'm
how we're doing it.
opposing my iron will here and saying go through this
I just
way.
wanted to make sure it
You've always
wasn't
been
an
a bully
accident.
going.
Oh, stop it,
Okay, Margaret.
stop it. Okay, the next one then. The utility buffer thing. Now, I read your comment that says, no, you can take the whole thing. But then when I read the whole thing, that you can only use the whole thing if you're in a utilidor, conduit. Is that correct?
As I understand it, in Chapter 7, we resolved this issue allowing the use of the entire utility easement. This subsection 2 at the top of page 9
Uh-huh.
it's saying basically that
Top of
no
page-
more than 50% of the utility easement shall be available to be used for the landscaping easement.
And
The
they're
staff
used-
administration recommendation is to remove that limitation.
No, I heard that, but here's what confused me. When I actually read the part where you said you could use the whole thing, there was a caveat that said that it had to be in a, yeah, so that's the right word, isn't it? I was kind of scrambling with my vocabulary adequate. So what I'd like to read is the language that you said where we can use the whole thing. Because it seemed conditional to me.
Debbie, on that amendment sheet you're on?
Yes,
Which
ma'am.
isn't numbered, unfortunately. Where are you?
I'm at
15.
this one, and then we've done 1, 2, 3, 4,
what amendment number is it?
Number 14,
Four-
15.
14. We had a lot of discussions, remember, Harriet, when we were talking about landscaping and how it was going to fit on the lot. And so one of the things we said was, let's allow at least some of the landscaping to go into the utility easements. Remember that?
Yeah.
And the administration, when they redid the economic impact analysis, instead now are saying that 100% of the landscaping could be required to go on the utility easements, but only, this is the part that I'm asking, I'm confused about, but only if all the utilities are in a single buried pipe. I think that's what it says. So I may be wrong. So he's
that when there's an
looking.
issue, you don't destroy all the landscaping. that's
So you don't
allowed
have to
overlap
dig,
with
yeah,
utilities.
exactly. Jim?
Where does the landscaping easement apply?
Well, there's sometimes where there's mandated landscaping around blah, blah.
Yeah, those landscaping buffer easements along
Thank you.
a lot of your major roadways in town
Yeah.
to preserve
Okay.
or to at least dampen the harsh look of what's behind
Okay,
it.
so we're not talking about around a piece of, the landscaping required between industrial and residential, or anything like that. This is purely landscaping along a highway or something like that.
No,
No, it
I
could be in other places too. It could be between dissimilar subdivisions.
If
where
it's
you have a residential
mandated.
subdivision backing up against industrial or commercial.
So if we require in division, chapter 7, 15 feet of landscaping between industrial and residential, to me, an easement is a specific real estate document with language and rights and stuff like that. And I'm hung up on the word easement here. I'm trying to understand where this would apply.
there's, my understanding, Jim, is any place that we mandate that you have a specific amount of landscaping, that the concern that the committee had about this before is what's the cost on development then if we require this, and so we wanted it to overlap. And the question really is, the implication is they're allowing actually more than we asked for and letting it all overlap, but I think there's a big caveat.
In the landscaping section, there's a subsection called planting location. 2107080F2. It reads, utility easements. Required landscaping areas may overlap with utility easements if all applicable landscaping requirements of this title are met within these areas. And then there's a provision about requiring the utility to provide written notice if they're going in to do maintenance within the landscaping.
So you
This
don't
is-
see that utilidor? I read it last night, I
Okay,
don't.
well, would that be in the subdivisions chapter?
I apologize, I didn't mark it, I just read it.
Maybe it's in the utility section.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Dan.
in the proposed section 2M2,
Uh-huh.
the way it reads is that use 50% unless the utilities are installed in a conduit.
There.
Conduit or utilidor of sufficient size to reduce the risk of line.
Okay, where is that?
In the middle of that.
Page
Is
9.
is it in blue?
Page 9 in blue, top.
Thank you.
So the recommendation of the staff and administration was to delete the blue.
Oh, okay.
To bring it into consistency with Chapter 7,
Oh, okay.
allowing overlap.
So the caveat that I read actually came from them.
The caveat is actually provisionally adopted. This
Oh.
whole section is provisionally adopted, and the recommendation, the amendment recommended by staff and administration was to delete it.
Yeah, I got that part.
And
I
the
just
commission
didn't
is
understand.
recommending it stay.
No, I understand. And so I just really wanted to understand what, if you delete it, what happens instead. But you basically said it could go 100%, but you would need the utility to sign off or not? Could you, I'm sorry, I apologize, Tom, read it one more time, I'm not,
Utility easements. Required landscaping areas may overlap with utility easements if all applicable landscaping requirements of this title are met. So
what does that mean?
the requirements of the landscaping section. For example, the landscaping section, if it requires an 8-foot landscaping bed with yay kinds of trees, then, as long as they meet the landscaping requirements that everyone else meets, they're fine.
So does that mean mandated landscaping can be in the utility?
Correct. Required landscaping areas.
Okay, then I'm fine with your deletion. Does anybody else? Got any questions or? Okay? Okay? Moving on. Thank you. I'm sorry for my confusion, I apologize. Okay, that one was 813 in the planning staff document. All right. So now the next one is the Chugach State Park issue, which is their amendment 15, and you didn't really address it totally. I did have a question about it, though. In their amendment, they talked about a 10-foot wide pedestrian easement,
Mm-hmm.
and we had, in the provisionally adopted, 20-foot wide pedestrian easement. And I thought we had to have a 20-foot wide pedestrian easement for trails.
We do. We lay into the reasons why on our page 24.
Oh, you do address the
It's RSU 8.14.
Yes, Tom, I can't keep up with you.
I'm sorry. Should have been a little more clear that
I
we
should
were
have read this
superseding
more
that draft.
thoroughly.
But
All right.
basically,
Where are you on now?
it's on page 24.
Okay, got it.
Of our review, and it covers the amendments on page 10 and top of page 11 in a blue line
Okay,
version.
got it, okay.
So Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended several things. First, right under the top of subsection D on lines 3 through 9, and changing it to what is recommended in blue, which are text on lines 10 through 16. That's effectively removed the authority of the justification for the municipality to require dedications for trails, where a trail alignment is called for in an adopted plan, unless it's access to Chugach State Park or one of these other several types of parklands. So the purpose of D, as provisionally adopted, was to provide that basic justification that a trail alignment can be required if it's called for in an adopted plan. So, for example, if the trails plan or a district plan calls for a trail, and it's not necessarily accessing Chugach State Park, it's just that general authority. And then under, and then in the section...
Wait, Tom, can you, I'm sorry, I got hung up, I started reading. You didn't like the word easement, and you wanted to change to alignment?
Correct. In that later section, the commission is recommending that their dedicated rights of way for pedestrian access or access to Chugach State Park cannot be required, that those only be easements, and that those easements be only a minimum of 10 feet wide. The department recommends that there be the ability to require a right-of-way for the Chugach State Park and the other park access, and that where that right-of-way is required, that it be a minimum of 20 feet.
So you would like it to read, the planning authority may require the dedication of a public pedestrian alignment or walkway?
Alignment is a bit more flexible of a term, and I think
I don't
Well,
understand
we
that.
talked about that internally. Alignment is, that's what, on the adopted plans, they're not very specific. So whatever those general alignments were, that's what we wanted to correlate to alignment. But secondly, we wanted the use of the dedication versus an easement, because in past examples, it's been a problem if it's not wide enough. It's a canyon kind of effect through when you've got properties adjacent to that used area, that it becomes a walled canyon when people fence it. So we were looking at two things. One, it'd be dedicated to the municipality to relieve the property owner of any liability responsibility for the use of that area. And two, it'd be sufficiently wide enough to prevent canyon.
Sally?
Basically, from a legal standpoint, you either give the property or you give an easement. Either there's a dedication, which is a true giving of the property. And the commission said, that's a taking. I mean, you can't require somebody to have to give up their property. That's not fair. It's fair to require an easement so that there's access. That really, an easement, the concern should be access to the parks, access to big community areas, not that you have to give up part of your property. You give up a right, which is an easement, just like you give up easements for utilities and other things. And once the easement is given, that provides the access that's needed. And the other big concern they had was that it not be used if there's no park plan in place, community use in place, that there should be some identified use so that it's not, you have this property, therefore let's just provide additional easements when they aren't identified or needed, or, they tried to really tie it into natural use areas, park plans, Chugach State Park, and then give an easement. And that allows the access instead of taking the property away from the property owner.
But Sally, I did read that there was a linkage to an adopted plan in what staff recommends too. You're saying that it's not there?
No, I'm saying it is. I'm saying that they shouldn't be just easements if there's no purpose, if it's not linked to an adopted plan.
Okay. Erica?
This situation takes place during platting. And during platting, the property owner of the large tract that they're subdividing dedicates property to the municipality for vehicular right-of-ways. And this is also suggesting that they dedicate, when called for on an adopted plan, that they dedicate property to the municipality for pedestrian right-of-ways, again, when called for in an adopted plan. So it's part of the process that you go through when you subdivide, is that you give up certain pieces of the property to the public
Right.
for publicly adopted reasons. The other issue between an easement and a dedicated right-of-way is the setback issue. We have no building setbacks from the edges of easements. So you could have a situation where a structure is built very close to a publicly dedicated easement, and we've ended up in that situation with getting complaints from property owners that, the public's walking right by my window. Well, yeah, because the house is right next to the easement, whereas the setback rule starts from the edge of the property. So if you have a dedicated but a pedestrian right-of-way, you're going to get that appropriate setback from the edge of the property, which is going to...
I could probably give you a really good example, focusing on a community center, South Anchorage High School. Part of that original property is now turning into estates, and because the high school was there, or planned at the same time they were subdividing, turning into estates, there are dedicated walkways to the municipality to get from the subdivision area into the school area. So that's the type of thing that we're looking for here.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Harriet?
there are a bunch of situations in West Anchorage that have been long established. West High School is surrounded by those kinds of accesses. Sand Lake and other lakes in Ernie's area have those kinds of accesses to the lakes, but they're very narrow. I understand exactly what Erica said. I wouldn't want people walking past my bedroom window if these easements, if these walkways are too narrow. I think
Okay.
they need to be allowed to be flexible, because we can't keep the public from getting to state parks and lakes that are not private, and so on and so forth. So that it needs to be a reasonable width in order to preserve everybody's privacy and allow the public access to a public facility.
Okay. What I was doing was, when I read what P&Z wanted, it seems to me that they are saying that the planning authority can require a dedication. I have some continuing concern on this alignment versus easement issue because an alignment to me is non-specific. And shouldn't the property owner know how much we're going to
Well,
take from them?
They will at the time of plating, Debbie. That's why alignment's used, because it's not really
But it's just platting.
known. It's really not known until they do the plat in relation to the plan, because the plan.
Okay, Jerry, but it says platting. The platting authority may require the dedication of a public pedestrian easement. And that's where you want to make it say alignment, right?
No.
No? Where? I'm sorry, I missed it then.
The intent was to replace easement with dedication and change the language of requiring the review to be coincide with the alignment of the adopted plan.
All right, man, I've been approaching it all wrong, because I thought that was where your problem was. Could you go to the blue line version, please? See what planning and zoning passed? I'm with you on the 10 to 20 feet. I got you there. And that, I think, would help prevent the canyoning thing. It addresses Harriet's issue. And we talked about that extensively in committee previously. But this alignment easement thing, and I don't see what's the matter with what they did. I really don't.
I
So,
think the main thing, whether it's alignment or right-of-way or what have you, is that it's important to transfer that fee simple ownership to the municipality for several reasons, and one is to
Okay.
protect the people who will eventually buy those
okay.
lots
I don't see
from
they,
the liability issues.
we agree. I don't see they didn't do that.
I think easement implies it's on somebody's, on private
Easement,
property.
yeah,
We're
easement.
just trying to get away from the word easement into,
Oh, I see. Fee simple is an
Right-of-way.
easement. I got you now.
and I think Jerry's point is that when trails plans are done, there isn't that analysis of the, where should this trail actually go, kind of going out there and surveying it. And so a line is drawn on a map, and the idea of talking about an alignment is that, the line can move a little bit. It can be a little bit this way or a little bit
Yeah,
that way.
but
So-
Erica, this is specifically talking about platting.
Mhm.
The platting authority, and the platting authority isn't going to do the alignment. The trails maker was going to do the alignment. The platting authority is going to do the easement.
They're going to do the dedication in relation to the appropriate final alignment, because the trails plan, the Chugach they're pretty
Okay.
close to being specific in location, but not exact.
Please look at blue line. Show me what's wrong. Down.
Well, I'm looking on line 41 on the line here on page 10, and it specifically says that the planning authority may modify the alignment.
Yeah, I saw that too. I had that underlined on mine. Cheryl?
One difference between a black and then blue is shall versus may. The community says that you shall require the dedication of a public easement.
Okay, that's a
Community
good
says
point.
you might.
Thank you, that's a point. They did not mention that though here, so that,
Right, why is the whole, I'm confused. The way we've done this before is if one word changed, then the whole blue paragraph doesn't have to be repeated. It should just be
wait a minute,
the
it's
single
one?
word that has changed.
Yeah.
Cheryl just identified that the word shall has changed.
Right, and that's how I was approaching it, Harriet. I thought, okay, we'll fix 10 to 20, and I don't mind talking about the shall may, but they're talking about changing the word easement alignment, and I don't get it. That's all. I'm trying to understand.
Then you can change easement to right-of-way.
Where?
On
What
30
line?
On line 35.
The planning authority may require the dedication of a right-of-way
A
instead of
public
a...
pedestrian right-of-way for connectivity with the trail to.
Why are we considering, this is government language, why would we want to change it? Why would we not just go with the black?
Because planning and zoning is giving us advice that is problematic, and so what we're doing is reviewing what they say is problematic to see if we agree. And I don't understand the problem right now, so I'm trying to understand the problem.
Well, they wanted a narrower route, and they wanted shall to may.
Okay, well, the narrower, I agree with staff. There's nothing in here about shall to may. I understand the shall to may, but that's not what they're saying is the problem. They're saying the problem is the word alignment easement. That's what I'm trying to get, Cheryl, that's all. Go ahead, Mr. Kiefer.
In the past, historical dedication of these trails have been actually by three methods. It's actually been dedicated right away to the public by plat. After the fact, it's been by easement dedicated by document. It's also been by dedicated tract. So there's several different vehicles we can actually use to establish when a subdivision comes in, whether or not there is a trail expectation through that particular subdivision according to the plans.
Okay, well, what we had provisionally was the dedication of an easement.
I apologize for the confusion here, Debbie, but what we would suggest is on page 10, 19 through 34, leave the as originally provisionally adopted and
Why?
change the first on line 20 to dedication of a right-of-way for a trail, and then the one change of the correct name for the Chugach State Park access plan, which is
Okay, Jerry, my mind is pretty literal and pretty, step at a time. I don't get why blue is worse than black. I don't get that. I got the 10-foot wide thing.
it's a may and it's a 10.
Okay,
It's an easement.
that's the part that I don't get. Jim?
Debbie, we specifically put in the words, in adopted municipal plans, which don't appear in the black, because we felt that there could be other parks, Birchwood or other parks, that where if there was a plan, we wanted the ability to provide access. So we got municipal plans or successor plans, trying to provide for some.
Okay, but they say the same thing, Jim. The planning authority shall require the dedication of public easement on a trail designated on an adopted municipal plan. Read the black.
It's there.
I missed it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's in the second line, line
Okay.
21.
Recommend leaving language
I just don't understand your objection, Jerry,
to
that's all.
to the easement.
I don't understand the problem, that's all.
Madam Chair, the blue section is 3 or 4 lines shorter than the black section. I think we need some careful analysis of what we're just deleting out of hand without being careful
One thing
about it.
that's disappeared from the black section is lines 26 through 28. If the plating authority approves an alternative location for a trail easement as a substitute for an existing easement, the existing unused easement shall be vacated unless the property owner agrees otherwise. So that sentence is gone. I don't know if it's been replaced by something
By
else,
agrees
but-
otherwise, does that mean disagree?
If the property owner wants to keep the other easement, that's fine, but
Okay, so this is just flexibility for the property owner. I don't see why that's a problem
Madam
to
Chair,
keep
that
that.
sounds to me like it solves their problem. I don't know why they're eliminating something that solves their problem. If there's an easement that is no longer needed, that sentence appears to allow it to go away.
Okay, guys, we're spending way too much time on this. Let me try, maybe you and I could have a private conversation on this easement alignment thing so I can understand. And can we hold on this one? I hate to do it, but this is consuming us and it seems like a little thing. All right. Deleting standards for sidewalks and walkways. Okay, I had amendment suggestion here, actually. Why don't you go ahead, Tom? What's your point here
Okay,
on 15?
On page 18, lines 20 through 23, in the subdivision improvements section, the Planning and Zoning Commission is recommending that sidewalks shall not be required in urban areas on both sides of a street, and that pathways or trails should not be required in a rural area on both sides of a property. The Planning Division recommends that the language proposed by Planning and Zoning Commission not be included in the subdivisions chapter, and that the pedestrian facility standards be resolved in Chapter 7, where the Title 21 rewrite actually addresses sidewalk requirements and whether they should be on one or both sides, and what should happen in rural areas or urban areas. It's the wrong section to be going into this.
Okay, defer to
Aside
7.
from all the substantive problems with requiring the municipality to not require sidewalk on both sides of any street of any size.
Okay, so let's defer that to 7. I did have a request on this, though. Is this is the section that talks about Class A and Class B, or not? I lost my place, I'm sorry.
Chapter 7 addresses Class A, Class B, and its pedestrian facility
Okay, maybe
requirements.
that's where I saw it
I mean,
then.
the definitions of Class A and Class B.
Yeah.
They're on page 14.
Thank you, I thought I saw it.
Oh, okay.
13 and 14.
Okay, what I would like here, because I've frequently dealt with situations where I've got a whole bunch of R6s, R7s, and then an RO stuck in the middle. Erica knows this, what I'm going to say, probably. I would like a sentence that says, if the area is surrounded by, here's the predominant zoning issue. And we talked about this and we were never able to resolve it earlier. But if you've got like one little R2 or R4 in the middle of a bunch of R7s, or how do you deal with the improvement issue? Erica?
One of the concerns with that is that when you have that urban zoning district, the allowed intensity of use on that property may warrant the urban improvements despite the fact that the surrounding areas
Okay,
are
and
not.
yeah, you consistently said that, and I have to tell you that particularly when you have one lot that's surrounded by other zoning, it doesn't make sense to say require a sidewalk. So I will continue to push for that, something that defines it, and I'm fairly loose on, how you do it. If you do it one lot,
We'll try to come up with some language.
predominant zoning needs to continue in that. Okay. And we're going to hold on the sidewalks, all the sidewalk stuff till 7, right? Okay, what else we got here? Warranties?
We skipped a couple, but the last one here in
Oh,
order
did we?
is...
Well, let's not skip. What do you want to,
Do you want to go back and do those first, or do warranties first and then go back?
I'm sorry, I lost.
Warranties and finish that.
Well, let's go ahead and do warranties.
Okay. That's issue 8.16 on the department's review document, page 26.
Uh-huh.
And it addresses proposed amendments on 28 and 29 of your blue line version. Just really quick, the blue line, all the track changes in section H, release of guarantee of improvements from line 19. Basically, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved these recommended changes from the Department of Administration, which resolved or dealt with public comments. And so most of these changes come from the Department of Administration in response to issues raised with this section. And the Planning and Zoning Commission, however, has added several phrases on page 28 and then a section on page 29 of concern. And this response deals with only those several specific additions.
Okay. Tom, could you back up a minute? So there's some things you want to add that are different from the provisional adopted? Or do you want to go, did I hear you correctly?
Correct, and those were accepted or approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So most of the changes you see in your blue line track change version, they are changes from the provisionally adopted code. Most are agreed upon by the Department of Administration and Planning and Zoning.
Okay.
But the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended several specific additions
I see.
that are of concern.
Okay. Well, considering that when we did this subdivision the first time, I've got enough longevity to know that it was a significant compromise on all parties. So frankly, I'm with you here on this one. I'd rather keep what you worked out with in the past than change back. Unless somebody... P&Z, do you want to gripe about that?
Well, a number of the changes staff agreed to.
Yeah, no, we'll go with what they agreed with.
Okay. I just got this today, so I don't know what they're disagreeing with.
Okay. Well, you certainly have the ability to talk more about it, but I'm biased for something that I worked on in the past that was a compromise.
You compromised, Debbie?
I compromised big time on this one.
The big concern, you don't like the 60 days before the expiration of the warranty period. And what else, Tony? Go ahead.
Mr.
I
Keith,
can maybe explain this one. Using examples from a pre-construction conference just earlier this week, the contractor anticipates, and what I'm objecting to is the 7 days for reasons that are justified. They don't anticipate completing construction until the second week in October. Typically, right-of-ways even close the next week in October. To where if I get a request at a point where they're actually ready to close the rights-of-way for a final inspection, I don't want the fact that I can't get out there because I can't see anything. It's covered with snow and ice to prevent me from doing an inspection. And I don't think that by default, a request very late in the season should automatically put a project on warranty. The contractor should better schedule their work. And then the other thing is...
Can we stop there and ask, is
Sure.
there any, I think what P&Z wanted was some finality to the process so that it isn't just, you can extend that, there's a 14-day period, and then it gives you the ability to extend it.
It's not indefinite,
For how
though.
long?
It's not indefinite.
No, it's not indefinite. As soon as they can get back out there to physically, we can physically do the inspection. We can even offer some of the development teams the opportunity to go out and clear the snow and ice so that we can actually see the improvement. That costs money, and generally they'll say, let's just wait till the spring. So it's not indefinite, and we've actually started using different tools to program these things. All right. A good example is if we know there's a scheduled date for off warranty, we're now including that in our on warranty letters. We're actually programming a time 2 years out to actually do that inspection. And we back up 60 to 120 days now, depending on when that date might fall. I have a warranty inspection, for instance, right now scheduled for the middle of January. We know it's not going to happen. So we're actually scheduling an inspection in September to make sure that's held up under the 2-year warranty. But that does not abbreviate the warranty period. It still goes to the end of the 2 years. If there's a catastrophic failure in the construction, even after we've done a warranty inspection, developer should fix that.
Well, back to the first issue, what about adding that the extension is for something that says once the unusual circumstance is over, then the time period continues to run, because there's nothing like that in there now. It just says that if an unusual circumstance such as extreme weather happens, the 14-day period is extended. There's no finality to, or what you're saying is as soon as that condition is done, the rest of the 14
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, as soon as we get written confirmation from the developer they're ready for a final inspection, we will schedule one most likely within the next 5 working days.
Because I think if we could just add something that is extended for the number of days that the unusual circumstance occurs.
Okay, but keep in mind, that could be an entire winter.
Yeah, and that's fine. But I think the concern, and that's,
Okay,
PNC
I don't-
understands that. It's
Are you
just-
okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, and I think we're okay with that. Where I'm coming from is there was really nothing on the city. The city had indefinite carte blanche before we did this the first time. And so I frankly thought we made really significant progress, and I was proud of myself, darn it. And so now, yeah, really. So it's gonna, yeah. All right, so you don't mind putting that language in? Is there anything else real big, Jim or Sally, on this that I'm missing? Okay.
So
All
we're
right.
changing 7 days to what?
The
The,
length of time that the unusual circumstances exist.
Good.
Something to that effect.
okay,
That's fair.
all right. Okay. Tom?
Yeah, the other thing that I had on this was, you had added a whole paragraph H9, which had to do specifically with the end of warranty inspection, and it's placed in the final inspection section. So if anything, it should be moved to another section.
Is it in conflict with that other section, Don?
It's also in conflict with the other section, yes. They're recommending 60 days. Existing is 30 days. And again, we're checking the calendar to see what makes sense to where we schedule it through Microsoft Outlook, just to remind ourselves. We've gone to the extent of actually setting up the mail facility. It's not dependent on a person. So as you get rotation in staff, it's still there, and following people can update it, keep it going. And you got a constant reminder every single morning what's due 90 days out, 120 days out, so that you catch those and it happens.
All right.
So I'm going to address the paragraph I've asked for inclusion.
The subdivider shall monitor? Is that what
Yes,
you're talking about?
Exactly.
Go
And
ahead.
again, it's shared responsibility. We have too many developers that during a warranty period, they can see failures in their own work, and they do nothing to correct it. They wait for a letter from the municipality to fix something. If they notice it, because they're also building houses in the subdivision that they just completed the common improvements, if they notice a drainage feature failing, for instance, they should take the initiative to notify us, because we're not out there every day during a warranty period checking on the improvements ourselves. And when we do, we charge time to the project and we get complaints about the charges. So I'd like to share the responsibility during the warranty period between the municipality and the developer, so that if either of us notice anything, it gets fixed.
Sally?
I think the concept that if the subdivider notices something, it should get fixed, I don't think that's offensive. The requirement the subdivider monitor the improvements, to me,
What does that mean?
yeah, how
Mr.
often
Keefer.
and when are they in violation of that? And what if it's a subdivider that isn't here during the winter? I mean, certainly to me, if the concept that you first said that if something comes to, if they know about something, they should fix it. I agree with that.
Yeah. A lot of our subdivisions, the home builder is also the developer, so they are on site, so they can notice it almost on a daily basis. Once a plat is filed, home construction starts. And the first thing to go in is a bunch of foundations so they can build the houses over the winter. So they're on site all seasons. And if they notice something, they should bring it to our attention.
Yeah, but that isn't what this requires.
She wants to know if the word monitor is going to require producing logs that show.
Oh, I got you. Reporting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the word monitor. I mean, take Connie Shimura. I mean, she isn't the builder. She develops the subdivision. Builders come in and start building. How often is she supposed to go back out to every subdivision and look and see?
How are you going to interpret that?
I think it could say if a subdivider learns during the warranty period of a defect, the subdivider should take steps to repair it, you know.
Okay.
And that seems reasonable to
Yeah,
me.
even that would need further definition, because that would mean that we're out there on a very regular basis looking at it, and we have to notify them.
Yeah,
once
I
they-
think
how do they
you
learn
need
about
to
it?
clarify what you mean by
Okay.
monitor.
Why don't you just replace it with maintain? That's what's required anyway.
Well, once it goes on warranty, we do the regular maintenance if it falls within ARPSA. So it can't be maintained. I gotta come up with a better word.
You do. All right, so we got everything except the word monitor in there.
Fantastic.
And the addition on the length of time of the natural, whatever. Okay, I had one additional one here. Are you done with 8?
We had 4, they all deal with subdivisions on slopes, but if
Well,
you want to go.
No, let's go ahead.
Okay.
Mine was actually a slope one too. So go ahead.
Okay. The subdivisions on slope section, it's a section of the subdivision design standards for when property is subdivided
Yeah.
into a
Which
subdivision.
amendment of theirs are you on?
We'll start on page 4 of the track change version, and it's the applicability section of the slope section, line 44. So,
What page are you on? What page you on, Tom?
I'm sorry, in the track change versions, it's page 4, and then on the planning department review, it starts on page 14.
So you don't want them to apply to a single lot? Or you do want them to apply to a single lot?
This is about, we basically recommend that this provision added to 44 not be included because we believe it's unnecessary and it could cause confusion.
How about if it's a lot of a certain size?
Well, that's part of the confusion. Basically, all this is doing is that this is the part where you have a big tract of unsubdivided land,
Right.
and you're determining whether the subdivision on slope design standards of this section are going to apply to
Yeah.
the design and the lotting pattern of that
Right.
development.
Right.
And so it reads that it's basically the applicability is clear. It's to that one large lot, and once it's determined whether or not the lot, the large tract overall has an average slope of 20% or greater, whether or not, then you basically decides whether or not these design standards even apply to it. So it's really this. It could never be interpreted to apply to an individual lot within that subdivision once it's subdivided.
Sally?
Well, that's what planning and zoning wanted to confirm. So if he's saying it couldn't be applied to an individual lot, then we need to leave it in there to just clarify that it can't be. They were concerned that at some point, somehow it could be applied to an individual lot. So it was really a clarifying amendment just to make certain that what was being said was being.
Okay, Tom? That's kind of how I read it too. What am I missing? Jerry?
There was a provision in there for 30% initially. What we're trying to do here, and I'm trying to get to the exact detail there, but is to minimize fill and grading on steeply sloped
Yeah,
properties.
and I'm with you. That's fine. I think it's just a clarification. How can we make this clearer? Erica?
For me, it adds confusion because there's two criteria for the applicability of applying
No,
this section.
it should be written more clearly. I agree. Both sides are not good.
Can you explain what's wrong with the original language? Because to me, it's, you have to have 5 acres, and either you have an average slope of 20% or greater over the entire property, or 30% of the area to be subdivided has slopes of 30%. If either of those two conditions apply, then your subdivision has to meet the requirements of section H. Otherwise, your subdivision doesn't. So I
Jim or
I
Eric,
don't
or
understand.
what's the problem?
Well, okay, so you have that situation and you have the 30% and then you divide it into lots, then they don't want to have the 30% have to apply to an individual lot. And I don't think that's the intent.
I don't even see
Okay.
how you read that in there.
Hold on, Jim?
On paragraph B, after the word greater, can we put over the entire property? 30, no, probably be 30% of the entire area to be subdivided has slopes 30% or greater. I think that clarifies, and then we can get rid of C.
I just think that the Planning and Zoning Commission's concern was that, okay, great, 30% across the board, that is applicability. But then when you get individual lots, they don't want to have that 30% applied to each individual lot.
Okay, so we need to clarify that they're talking about, the concern is that lots interior to this parcel. This one.
Individual lots interior to the parcel don't have to meet those.
An example, Eagle Crossing has
Okay.
an ordinance. The zoning ordinance prohibits development on 30% greater slope
Yeah.
areas
Uh-huh.
in total for
Okay.
lots and for the whole parcel and for the lots. I think probably in some cases, those lots could be developed appropriately in certain cases, but not across the board was a bit of the problem, that they're going to be 30% naturally when you create the lot if you don't change the topography. So it's been a problem for Eagle Crossing because they have that very specific requirement. The question is, should you do mass grading on land to develop lots with 30% slope? Generally, it should be discouraged because you change the natural drainage patterns when you start doing that, and then you're going to have to do a bigger grading for the property to function differently.
Okay,
I
So
think that,
Tom?
Jim's solution, I don't see what's wrong with that.
Say it again, Jim.
30%, reading paragraph B,
Yeah.
line 42. 30% of the entire property. I'm using the language off of A. I'm just bringing part of language A and putting in B
Okay.
for clarity.
Are you replacing the word area with entire property?
Yes.
Tom?
Here's the tract to be subdivided in cartoon form.
Yeah,
It's a lot. It's an individual lot. I think that,
but it's 5 acres or more, or it's not?
well, if how can there be a measurement if it cannot apply to an individual lot? The tract to be subdivided, it's an individual lot. It's just, I wouldn't read it that way, but somebody could.
Or how about individual lots once subdivided?
Once it's subdivided, the subdivision design standards are done.
I think Jim's solution works.
Just a friendly amendment to your
Go ahead,
solution.
Mr. Keever.
Could we just move it up into the intro? This section applies to parcels to be subdivided that are of areas 5 acres or greater?
No, because then, no, I think it has to go down below that.
That sets the stage for the second use of the area in B.
Okay, I don't want to belabor this. Let's go ahead with Jim's suggestion, and then if you have further thoughts to refine it, bring it back to us.
They both clarify the intent.
Madam
All
Chair,
right,
and
go ahead,
that also
Harriet.
includes eliminating line 44.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
We had several recommended amendments to, on page 5, lines 36 through 43. This amendment is allowing the plotting authority to apply more limited requirements for street sidewalks where you are subdividing on a slope. The recommended changes is to, among the approval criteria right now address, under the Commission's amendment, address negative impacts to the terrain, the cost of the sidewalks improvements in relationship to the development, and then possibility of alternative locations for pedestrian facilities.
Okay.
The department's recommending two amendments to those approval criteria. First of all, to add an amendment that addresses the need for the pedestrian facility
Okay.
in the area. And secondly, to amend the wording of the last criteria as it appears in line 42, under the commission's recommendation reads, and the possibility of alternative locations for pedestrian facilities department recommends that changing that approval criteria to read, and the demonstration
Okay, how do you do
providing
that?
for alternative
How do you
locations.
demonstrate? I'm trying to think practically here. How the heck could you demonstrate that? Am I?
Well, I think that through the if someone else chime in here, but I think through the subdividing process, they would identify in the subdivision design where there would be another way
Oh,
to
that's
get
all it
rid of
means?
these.
Okay, I thought it meant a lot more.
Like an alignment or a way to get up.
Okay, but,
Yeah, we've done that several times just in the last
Okay.
year and a half.
all right,
Where we
Jim?
found an alternate trail alignment.
Okay, Jim?
As long as it says identifying alternate locations, and we get rid of the demonstration work. If we can identify them,
Is that problematic for you guys? The demonstration hung me up too, because I didn't know what it meant.
Here's a good example. We recently had a new subdivision down in Alyeska near Challenge, Alaska.
No, we like it, it's
That
just,
was a challenging one where we had to demonstrate an alternate alignment to satisfy ADA requirements.
oh, I see, that's why you had demonstration.
How do you demonstrate?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
To actually have a path there is a path that follows the new Verbier right away. The nice paved road going up the mountain.
Okay,
But
what-
that's a 12% slope. ADA doesn't accept that,
So-
so we had to find an alternate means for another pathway.
So, Mr. Kiefer, the suggestion that Jim just said of showing, what did you say, showing?
Identifying.
Identifying. Is that problematic? Okay, let's go with that. Continue, Tom?
8.8 from our issue response on page 16 refers to the very top line of page 6 in your blue line version. The top line is provisionally adopted.
It's not page 16.
Did I say page 6?
6.
Of your blue line version, I'm sorry.
Oh, I got this one too. Why delete that?
Why delete unless authorized by the planning board?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the whole vehicular route section.
Oh, that's next. This
that was
deals
mine.
specifically with line 1 and 2,
Okay.
where the recommendation by the
Mass
planning.
grading unless authorized by planning board. Why did you do that?
thought there were cases where it may be reasonable to do it, and we're just giving them an opportunity to show where it was reasonable to do it.
Do you guys think it's ever reasonable to do it?
This
Mass
is-
grading?
Mass grading of an entire subdivision on a slope 20% or more is.
What if the subdivision is one lot, 1 acre, I'm just asking.
Right.
There was no concrete example by planning and zoning, just the thought that if you prohibit it, then the unusual, rare situation arises and you.
I got it.
I can give you a real world example right now. We get complaints from Providence Point because there was mass excavation of phase 10, and I don't have a schedule when they're
No.
actually going to follow.
It's
that.
easy for me to see complaints on this. So I'm kind of with you, but the situation I'm asking about is if you have a real tiny lot, is there ever a situation where you want to be able to provide it? I don't know. Just a second, he had his hand
Go
up
back to
first.
Ernie's example, 1964, the graben that was filled from behind Old Providence all the way around to L Street, up L Street, and then again, the mass grading that occurred in the flood area.
But that's not on steep slope.
Well, it is a steep slope.
It's a blunt.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that, this type of thing, it's in conflict with the standards in Chapter 7, where even for an individual lot, we have steep slope development standards, and even there, if I'm not mistaken, prohibit grading the entire
okay.
property.
It was just a question.
This section only applies when you have 5 acres or more, so.
Oh, is it? This is still under the 5 acres? Okay. It's hard for me to see mass grading of 5 acres justified on a slope like that. Sorry, guys. I'm with them. Go ahead, and the next one is the vehicular routes?
Last is vehicular routes.
Why did you delete that? This is all the blue line cross off on page 6.
Contain amendment R28, what does it mean?
Well, this blue line section is a recommended amendment. It was carefully developed with the assistance of the engineers from the Project Management Engineering Department. Its purpose is to, as twin goals, it limits disturbance in areas of slopes while allowing development and access to more remote parcels. So it's a section that balances the objectives between providing access and ensuring as limited disturbance as possible, and it supports the policies of the Hillside District Plan and other elements of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, no, the reason I had it on my notes is I read it and I didn't see what was the matter with it. That's why I'm asking. I understand why it's there. I don't understand why it's not there.
My only recollection is of a meeting with 2 engineers that recommended deletion, and I could go back to those 2 engineers and ask.
Okay, so at this point, let's keep it in unless we get a rationale for taking it out. That makes sense. So we're with you on that one. Right? Is that what you wanted? Okay. Are you done?
With I think so.
Okay. Well, you got my 8s. The prevailing zoning thing, this one, the 10-foot, those were mine. Okay. Can we go on to the 2 on 11, the 11 and 13 one?
It's 11:38.
I think, okay, guys, this will take, I think, 2 minutes. I don't think there'll be any opposition. Can you handle it?
Where are you moving?
Start the timer.
Oh, man. These are
This is on the back of your agenda.
Tom gave us, these are brand new. These didn't go through P&Z, but its staff had issues on 2 chapters that P&Z didn't even look at.
Oh, right, okay, I looked at this.
Remember? Okay. And I just, if we can deal that, then we'll stick with our schedule. That's what I'm hoping. Tom, real succinctly, give the rationale for the first one, if you don't mind.
This is a clarification. It was a requirement in the sign code that has created confusion for applicants
About
and
measure.
reviewers, and it's a how to measure. It's a technical change and a clarification that would help people out.
Do you have
That's
it?
basically the proposal.
I just lost it. Thank you. Is there any question on this one? Any opposition to this one?
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. What's the next one?
Chapter 13, again, the Administration Department brought forward a proposed amendment for public review. This is, again, a clarification, and the explanation that's provided for it is that if, it's basically clarifying if the code violator that it's speaking of is not the owner of the property.
That the property owner
owner
does,
be
which makes
notified.
sense to me. Any objection? Okay, we're blessing both of those.
Okay, so you just killed 2 chapters.
Blessing. Just, any kind of gain you can get is really cool. All right, with that, thank you, folks. We're done for today. There will be no meeting next Thursday or the following Thursday. So don't forget us. We're coming back after.
This is on the CD, right? The letter you handed out earlier?
Yes, it is. That is